All right, hello everyone. Thank you for coming to the Graduate School Info Session brought to you by ASME and Sigma. We have a panel of grad students who are going to talk a bit about what they've been doing, and then if you have any questions, it's a great chance to find out more about what it's like to be in a PhD program. So now let me turn it over to them, let them introduce themselves. So thank you guys for coming, and thank you to the panel.
Thanks, Jason. So my name is Spyros, and we have from left to right Catherine, Zac, Lara, and Stephanie. So let's first introduce ourselves, and then we'll go over like some topics, and then a Q&A. What's that, Stephanie?
Sure. So my name is Stephanie Firehammer. I'm a second-year PhD student in mechanical engineering. My research is in computational fluid dynamics of multi-phase flows. I did my undergraduate degree at Purdue. I'm originally from Indiana, in aerospace, aero and astro engineering. I don't know if anything else is particularly relevant. That's me.
All right, my name is Lara Backer. I'm also a second year, and I'm also studying computational fluid dynamics with a focus on the fuel chemistry in the fluids. And I did my undergraduate degree at a school in Canada, but I'm a dual citizen, U.S. American. And then also Stephanie and I both got NSF fellowships, and I did any of you guys as well? Like, do you have any fellowship?
No.
It's okay. You guys are just better. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, we can all probably give
Yeah,
advice on that.
you can definitely mention that, yeah. So my name is Spyros. I'm a third-year PhD student in mechanical engineering, and I'm working on robotics. I did my undergrad in Greece, so I'm here as an international student. Zac.
So I'm Zac Manchester. I did my undergrad here in AEP, and then I stuck around for an MEng, and then stuck around again for a PhD in aerospace. And what else was I saying? Oh, so I'm now a fifth year, so I'm almost done, hopefully. I think that's about it.
I'm Catherine. I'm a second-year PhD student in mechanical engineering. I finished my high school back in Macau or Hong Kong, and I have my undergrad here at Cornell. After my undergrad, I go into the PhD program here. So this is my second year, and I'm working on high-level robot control.
So Catherine and I are in the same group. We're working with Professor Hadaskos Gazi. You might know her. She teaches mechatronics sometimes, and she also teaches senior level class autonomous mobile robots. Okay, so here's how we're thinking about this, right? So we'll go over, briefly why we decided to go to grad school. How did we go through the application process very briefly? Then, how it is to be a PhD student, not specifically at Cornell. We try to make this a bit general because, if you're going to be going to grad school, it's not going to be Cornell. Zac is the exception.
Unless you do what I do.
Yeah, unless you Zac it out. Okay, and then we can go into a Q&A where you ask us, specific questions that you might be wondering about. So again, let's start with Stephanie.
Okay. All right. So how did I get to be a PhD student? Well, I guess I'm kind of one of those people that I need to investigate every possible option to feel comfortable making a choice, sort of. So in my undergrad, I did pretty much everything that I could do. I worked in industry for several years over the summer, and in a couple different types of industry positions, like a sales position and like a very mechanical engineering position, all sorts of things. And then I went on a study abroad and got my first class of computational fluid dynamics, and then I went into a research position, and I was doing a fluids experimental research thing. So I found out that I liked fluids, but I really didn't like the experimental aspect of it. It was really messy. There's so many other things you have to worry about, like real life, which is, it's just so inconvenient. So I really had liked the computational fluid class that I had taken. So the following year, which was my senior year at Purdue, I got involved with a professor who was doing computational fluid dynamics, just somebody that I had really liked. And that was kind of where I was like, okay, I like this type of research. This is really fun, this is really interesting. And I didn't particularly care for the industry jobs that I had done. They were fine, but I was kind of bored. So I decided that I wanted to go to graduate school, especially because in computational fluid dynamics, a lot of the positions require at least a master's degree anyway. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So it was just kind of like a comfortable place. Like, okay, I go here, I can still go to industry and all that. So I started doing the application process, and when I was applying, I found Olivier Desjardins here, and he was doing basically a combination of the experimental work that I had done, which I liked the subject, but not the experimental part, and doing computational, so that was kind of it. I got in touch with him in the fall, and then kind of ended up here. So that's kind of what I did.
So you did apply to other programs too, right?
I did. I applied to Purdue because I knew I could get it. And I applied to here, and I applied to University of Texas at Austin. I applied to, oh my gosh, I applied to North Carolina State, and I applied to one more place, oh, University of Michigan. And actually, so, I mean, I guess maybe this is a tangent, but I'll just say one little thing about, as far as applications. What I did was very targeted. I spoke to the professor that I had been working with at Purdue, and I said, okay, where's good for computational fluid dynamics? That's what I want to do. So he said, okay, the best schools for this are these schools, and these are where these people are. And then I said, okay, what are second-tier schools? And what are schools that I can definitely get into? So I applied to 2 from each, like 2 safe schools, 2 schools that I thought, yeah, I have a pretty good chance, and 2 schools that I thought were way out of my league. One of those being Cornell. And ironically, the 2 schools that I thought I could definitely get into, I didn't get into those. So it was an approach, and I don't know if it worked, but that was kind of, I guess what I would say in summary of that is, it's different for every research where the best place to apply is. It's not the same as undergrad where you're just like, oh, I want to go to the big name school. You definitely want to look who's doing what you want to do. So I'm done talking now, I guess. Mario.
So I didn't really have like the same like feeling around for research. Like I was pretty sure that I wanted to like get a PhD like since I was 5.
Please elaborate.
I don't know. Like it was just like kind of a family thing, and I wanted to like teach and do research, and I just like knew that really early on. And then I got my undergrad degree in engineering physics, and it was basically like a dual degree in like physics and mechanical engineering. And I realized like I really liked the physics, and my program also had like a year worth of internships kind of combined in it, so like co-op. And I did most of my co-ops like in research labs, like all experimental fluids, and then yeah, actually all of them were in like experimental fluids, but then my final co-op was like in an industrial job. And at my first few research experiences, a lot of the times like the labs would be kind of empty because I'd usually be working there over the summer, and I was like, I'm not really sure if I want to do research anymore. And then in my final co-op term, I was working at this like industrial company, and it was also experimental fluids, but like everyone was doing research and everyone was really active and excited about it, and I realized that like it was really just the excitement that I was missing. And so I realized like that was definitely what I wanted to do. And I also realized at this job was that like basically you couldn't do any of the like really cool stuff unless you had like a PhD. Like you couldn't run any of the projects. You couldn't really do CFD. You'd basically be like a lab tech or like run the experiments. And I loved that when I was working there, but I was like, I'm gonna get bored of this in like a year. So that is why I was like, okay, this is definitely what I'm gonna do. And then I applied to Cornell and a bunch of other schools, University of Michigan, Colorado Boulder. There were a lot. But the way that I ended up choosing which schools, I didn't apply to Central. No, I applied to
Yeah. Right.
I should have. But anyways, the way that I chose schools to apply to was I went through journals of like fluid dynamics and like computational fluid dynamics, and I like picked out the projects that I like was the most interested in, and then I made like an Excel spreadsheet, and I was like, okay, these schools have like the most number of really cool fluids projects, and then I like ranked them, and I'm like, okay, like these are probably like the top 6 are schools that I'm obviously going to apply to. So I did, and that's how I ended up here. And I actually really like the Cornell system because at some universities the professors like accept you if you have a research match directly, and Cornell's like accepted you, and then you can kind of figure out if you wanted a research match. And the original person that I thought I wanted to work here didn't end up being the person that I actually really wanted to work here, and I kind of figured that out in the first like month or two. But it's really hard to know what you're definitely interested in until you start working with the professor. So I really like that system. Yeah.
Can we do the Q&A once this session is over? Okay. So I had a similar path to Stephanie. So I was mechanical engineering undergrad. I had no idea. I didn't even know what grad school was, honestly, until I was like in my third year and I started meeting some graduate students. And then I did a summer internship at the construction site for like a tunnel, for a railroad tunnel. And it was okay, you know, but it wasn't very exciting. I could tell I would get bored very fast if I were to do this my entire life. So then I started to working in this, I took a few classes in robotics and in control systems. And then I started doing research in a lab. And that's when I that's when I read my first research paper. That's when I realized that, you know, people do this thing called publishing papers and going to conferences, and that that there's like this entire global research community. And I was like, oh, this is very interesting. You know, might as well do that. So I decided to apply to grad school. And the way I went about it is, I knew I wanted to do control systems and robotics. That's why it got me excited in the first place. So I went to my professor who was studying in the US. And I was like, okay, you know, I found these, you know, like these 25 schools. Can you help me narrow it down to specific advisors in specific schools? And he helped me narrow it down. I applied to about 10 schools using your approach, actually, but it worked for me. So I applied to a few that were definitely out of my league. Who knows? Cornell was kind of one of them. I applied to a few I would definitely get in. I got in. And to a few that I was really certain I would get in. You know, I was afraid of random problems, and I got into those too. And so I didn't get into, for example, Georgia Tech or Princeton, but I did get into Cornell, so I was happy. And then what helped me pick Cornell over the other schools I got admitted in wasn't like the Ivy League thing or the ranking or anything. It was the visit weekend. Because I was torn between coming to Cornell and going to UC Santa Barbara, which is like a much nicer place to live, right? And even the professor there was like super top of his field in control theory. And I was gonna go there, but then I came to visit weekend here, and I saw the place, and it wasn't depressing as people were describing. Of course, it happened to be sunny.
Cornell weather.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I still liked it, and I met my advisor-to-be, and she was great. And I was like, okay, this is where I'm gonna go, and that's how I picked it actually. And yeah, this is why I came to Cornell, just because I got convinced 100% by the visit weekend. So when you guys are applying and you get the chance to visit and, you know, travel around and visit universities, you should definitely do that. It's like there's, as you guys said, there is no way to know if an advisor is a good match for you unless you actually get to interact with them in person and see their lab, see the students in their lab. You know, the lab may look great, but it might have been great 10 years ago, and now it's like falling apart, right? So this is very important. Zac.
I guess I'm up. So I did not think about going to, I guess first I'm curious, who in here is like aerospace? You guys, dynamics and controls people? Fluids people? What else is there?
This might be too defined.
I'm just wondering, you guys have no idea what you want.
Let's start with the question, who here is going to be applying this year to grad school?
Oh,
Okay, so a couple of you guys are a little younger. Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah.
So I had no idea that I wanted to go to grad school. I didn't set out to do mechanical engineering. I did applied engineering physics here, and I really like lasers and plasma physics and that kind of stuff. I ended up working for my advisor, starting as a junior, doing plasma physics experiments. And that's how I ended up sort of getting involved in space stuff. And then I had a summer internship at a company called Analytical Graphics that makes software for the aerospace industry. They make software that like models satellite orbits and figures out when you can talk to your satellite and all this kind of stuff. So I worked there for a summer, and I really liked it and liked the kind of stuff they did. And I figured out while I was there that all the people who actually got to do the interesting stuff and weren't code monkeys had PhDs, specifically in aerospace. So I started talking to them and like asking them, you know, where they went to school and all that kind of stuff. And so that was the summer after my, I think the summer after my junior year. No, it was the summer after my sophomore year when I had that job. So that's when I kind of started like figuring that out. And I talked to those guys a lot. So I liked space stuff, and I ended up really liking, then when I came back here, I took like a bunch of aerospace electives. So I took like the GPS class and the controls classes and all that kind of stuff, and liked that stuff. So I don't know, that's kind of how I got into it. And then I didn't really decide for sure to do grad school until I would say like the end of junior year, beginning of senior year, when a lot of my friends started talking about grad school too and all this stuff. And I started seriously looking into it and seriously thinking about it. So I applied during my senior year to a bunch of places. I got into a couple schools, but then it was the year of the financial meltdown. And I ended up getting strung out into like the summer with schools with funding offers. So a couple of schools had promised me funding initially when I got accepted and went and visited the whole thing. And then like every couple of weeks it was like, oh yeah, we'll tell you in a couple more weeks. Oh yeah, a couple more weeks. And then it ended up being graduation. I was like, what the hell am I doing? So I ended up like calling a couple of these places that had promised me funding and then had like strung me out, saying, hey, I really need to know what's going on. And so UT Austin, for example, which is one of the places I got in that I really wanted to go at that time, who had promised me funding initially, said basically, well, you can come, we can't promise you funding in the fall, maybe you can find a TA position somewhere, but maybe not, maybe you'll have to pay for your first semester, and then hopefully you can find funding your second semester. It's like this very ambiguous situation where I might have to pay $0 or $20,000 or something like this for my first year of grad school. So I decided that instead of going there with this ambiguous money situation, I would just stay here and do an MEng, because I had a bunch of credits from undergrad that I could count towards an MEng, and I could do it in basically one semester, like a lot of you guys probably check that out, right? So I was able to do the one semester MEng thing. I knew exactly what it was going to cost, and I knew I would have a degree at the end of it, and like it had a known like sort of end date and was more set in stone kind of thing. So I did that, and then I used that second semester, like the rest of that year basically, to reapply to grad schools and fellowships and all that stuff, and then got into some more schools and visited more schools. So I did not set out to stay at Cornell. I will say that. So I got into a couple more schools, visited the whole deal. Did get more solid funding offers the second year, and then ended up just deciding that I liked what I was doing here better. So I guess it was a weird thing because I had worked for the same advisor, for 3 years at that point. 2 years of undergrad and then my MEng, and so I had a really good idea of like what I would be doing and who I'd be working with and all that stuff. And just after visiting these other places, I decided that what I was doing here already was cooler than what the other options were that I would work on at these other places. So then I just decided to stay here. So that's kind of my story. Maybe a little long. Sorry.
It's fine. I guess my story my story changes when I was in my junior year. So before then, I never think about ever going to grad school just because of the setting of my entire family and things like that. And then in my junior year at Cornell, so I transferred into Cornell in my junior year, and the first semester I was working here doing project team and things like that. And then I didn't really like it. So after that I was like, maybe I give it a shot for the research. So I worked with Hadass, which is my current advisor, and it turns out to be much better than I thought. I liked what I was doing, and you get to choose what you want to do. Like the project is really flexible. You get to think, and there's just like not that many things that you can do when you're in internship and things like that. So I did like a couple of internships. I did it in US, I did it back in Macau, where I find it's okay, I learned a lot from it, but if you ask me to do it for like, let's say a couple of years, I just can't deal with it. You'll be working with like Excel spreadsheet, or just like you're doing control problems too, but it's not like you're creating something new. You feel like just trying to solve a problem. That's how I feel like when I was in my internship. So it's like at the end of my senior year, I was like, so what do I want to do with this? Do I actually want to go get a job and try again, or do I want to apply for grad school and go for a PhD? So what this is, I actually did both. So I did job search and also I did apply for grad school at the same time. Because at that point I still don't know what to do. And I guess since this is more about grad school, I'll talk about the grad school part. So grad school I applied for, I think around 7 to 8. Don't remember exactly what I applied. And at the end I got in like 3 of them, Cornell is one of them. And that makes me, well, I think I got to Stanford and I think University of Michigan as well. And at that point, I just need to decide like what do I want to do with them, like which one do I want to go to. And so I guess, I don't know, I like Cornell, I like what I'm doing. I mean, I want to change too. I do want to go some other places, but to me, well, Michigan and Cornell is similar, but in terms of like the research that I'm doing, I like Cornell more, and I just don't like California. Like, no matter what the weather is, I just don't like it. So since the thing is, I stayed in California for 2 years, I just like, no. It does not, I don't belong to there. I just want to go to research. That's how I feel.
Okay, also you've tried California.
Yeah, I tried.
Okay.
I lived there.
Northern or southern?
North Carolina, well, Bay Area, so.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
so okay,
So
that's
by
interesting.
Stanford, huh?
Yeah, so I don't really like it so much there. That's why I decided like Cornell is probably like
Okay.
the best option. And I like my advisor, so I end up working with her. Well, so I guess when I got accepted to Cornell, I still wasn't sure whether I'm gonna work with her later on or not. Because I was like, maybe I want to try something new and things like that. So I did talk to a couple of advisors still during the point, like the first year here that you get to pick advisor. So at the end I was like, yeah, that's still probably the best option I have. So that's how I ended up there.
Yeah. So I think this is a very cool thing about Cornell, that you don't have to decide on an advisor when you apply or when you get accepted, but you have a semester basically to pick an advisor. And you guys will see that as you're applying, not all schools have that system. In some schools, you are being admitted basically by a specific advisor. Like, unless you work with them, you will not be admitted or something like that. I know Georgia Tech is kind of like that. Is that not true?
I don't know, I think it's not as stringent most places. Some places are very stringent like that. Georgia Tech is.
Yes.
Very stringent that way. I feel like majority of schools, they're not gonna like give you a semester of funding where it's like really relaxed the way that Cornell does, but it's not like you looked at somebody's website and said, oh, maybe they're fine, and then you're tied to them for the rest of your PhD. It's not like that at all. There's still like some chance for meeting somebody new and saying, actually this is more my interest. So it's not so rigid. There's a middle ground.
If it adds some clarifying remarks to that, I think maybe it's not clear. Like applying for grad school or PhD in particular, maybe not for master's programs, it's a lot more like applying for a job than it is like applying for undergrad. You're basically applying to work for someone, you know, your advisor in their lab and do good things for them. So they're like looking to hire you because you're awesome at the stuff they do and they want you to work for them. That's like the vibe. And when you go visit places,
or you have potential to be also.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, and then they like when you go visit these places, so like visit week and stuff, you go interview with these professors. So like several of the schools I got into, like I actually had to go, and then you're interviewing with this guy, or you know whoever it is, a couple people generally when you go visit these places, and that's like a job interview. Like you're interviewing with them to try to feel it out, and they're feeling you out to see if they think you're a good fit. So that's kind of how it works. So it's much more targeted on like an individual level. So you definitely don't want to just apply to a department or a school. You want to apply to work with, this person.
It doesn't have to be only one person, but it should be more specific than I want to do mechanical engineering.
Yeah, that's a little bit contradictory to what I've heard of, that they kind of frown upon you saying that you want to work for some specific person in your personal statement, because that
So
implies
what
huge
actually
flexibility.
a lot of people did that I know of is like they named like, well Stephanie I know just named one person here because she knew that she wanted to work with one person here, but like for all the schools that I applied to, and I ended up getting into them all, I like named 3 different people, and I was like, I like all of their research, and like I want to get to know all of them more, and but like it showed that I had done some like looking into and like looking at their websites and stuff like that, but not
That's
like
the
I'm
advice
only gonna work with this one
That's
person.
the advice I go to. I got the advice of, whoa, if you mention someone, it's going to be like you're tying yourself to that person, but it's all about how you phrase it, right? It's one thing to say, I'm applying to Stanford to work with X, and another thing to say, I'm applying to Stanford, I'm interested in this area, I would be interested in working with 1, 2, 3 because they do X, Y, Z. That's much more, you've done your homework, but you're not tying yourself to any specific advisor yet, right?
It's kind of like, I'm interested in this kind of a field, I see that this person at your university does that, and so I think that there's someone I could work with, and I think that I would fit into your department. That's kind of how you phrase it. And then also, I mean, to be honest, so I'll tell kind of an interesting story, I guess, which will also sort of tie into like an NSF discussion. I was actually waitlisted at Cornell. Well, they don't call it that, but I was not in the first rounds. I didn't go to visit weekend. And I was flat out rejected at UT Austin. I got this beautiful thing. Stanford sent me this beautiful email, like, we love you, you're so great. We just can't accept you, and we're sad. It was so nice. And then UT Austin was like, not accepted in big red letters. That was and so this is where I was at the end of like getting late in the spring, and I had been in conversation with, in particular with Olivia, because he had responded to me and like he was really doing what I wanted to do. And I didn't know this at the time, but I came to find out later that he had been really pushing for me because I fit with his lab and I had mentioned like I like this person. So he, all this time, had been saying, no, but what about this girl? What about this girl? What about this girl? So it was actually very beneficial to me to have mentioned it. And how it ties into NSF is, I don't know about Cornell. Professor Kirby will argue with this, but I don't know. I did not get accepted at Cornell until I told them I had won an NSF. I won it my senior year, so I had applied in my first year. And when I said, hey, I won the fellowship, they were like, 5 minutes later, oh, you're accepted.
What fellowship?
Okay, so
I passed the beginning of my senior year, so maybe I missed the application.
no, you haven't.
it's
It's
November.
November. It's November. So if you look up, it's the National Science Foundation Fellowship. Graduate Research Fellowship.
GRFE.
Yeah, yeah, Graduate Research Fellowship
Fellowship
Program.
program, yeah.
That's it. Look into it and apply. It will be the best thing you do. Even if your application is total crap this year,
You can
It'll-
apply next year.
and it gives you practice to have done it. So basically, it'll be a lot like your application to schools where you'll write, like I had to write 2 essays. I think it was different the following year. But you and they go from the perspective of how does your research benefit society, sort of. And you just write up a research project. It doesn't have to be something that you.
It can be something that you've done before.
It doesn't have to,
whatever,
yeah, you don't have to,
doesn't
you just write it up as an example. Anyway, so this is the thing, and then they give you a ton of money and it's great.
And the reason this is good for applications is because then the university says, oh, somebody else is funding this student for 3 years, so I get 3 years for free.
Exactly.
So Stephanie is now working at Cornell for free for 3 years, so that's very nice for Cornell.
And it's a good thing. It's not essential, absolutely not essential, but I will say it's worth trying at least. It's worth putting your name in the bucket because UT Austin, they gave me the big not accepted when I was like, but I won this fellowship. They're like, oh, you're accepted now.
Seriously?
Seriously. So it's worth trying.
It implies that you know how your research will benefit society.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It makes
Yeah.
you kind of a free agent.
Yeah.
You can work wherever you want for whoever you want.
Yeah, you've been having a question.
Yeah, it's just a curiosity because Lara said you would like to do a PhD program since very young age.
Yes.
I was wondering when you know this definition of PhD program.
Well, so my dad went to MIT and got his grad degree there,
um,
and like he like works with physics and coding and stuff like that, and I was like, wow, that's so cool, and so he would like bring me around universities and stuff like that, and I would be like, oh, this is so cool. So that's kind of like how it started.
actually, my question is when you finally build your own definition of PhD program. I don't think it's 5 years old. You build the definition, or you change.
No,
right?
I was just like, oh, this is really cool, and I would get to be a professor and
when
research.
you finally know what PhD program is,
I don't know.
I don't know.
I just kind of, kept building. Like,
And you also did a bunch of internships at research labs, so you
Yeah.
kind of like, build up your own like paradigm of what
mhm.
that's gonna be
So
like.
gradually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So the one thing that I did notice and realize after coming to grad school that I didn't notice when I was applying, is that a lot of times, like, the group of applicants that a school accepts is based on, like, the professors that need students. So if, like, a lot of professors need, like, dynamics and control students one year, there's going to be a much larger proportion of their students accepted from dynamics and controls than from other areas. And, like, that's why it's so beneficial to apply to a bunch of schools, because, like, you don't really, like, it's really hard to know what a school is looking for in a given year.
Yeah, even if you think I'm definitely getting into this school, if they just don't get fluids people this year because they already had a ton of them.
As a good example of that, my advisor was on sabbatical and then worked at NASA for 2 years, so he wasn't here for 3 years. So we didn't take on any new students in our group for a couple of years, and so there were no space people.
And now they hired a couple of new space folks,
Yeah.
and Mason Peck is back,
Mason's back.
and now
So
they got like 5 new space type students. So it's like, you never know what's happening unless you can talk to someone who's already like a friend or a family member who's already at one of these schools and get some inside scoop. there's no way to know about these things.
Yeah, take advantage of that, because actually we had a new professor from Cornell that came to Purdue. He just got hired on, and he had been working with Professor Stephen Pope. And I don't know if you guys really, how many people you guys know, but he had been working with him, and obviously he's a big guy in CFD. He's the big famous person. So, you know, I was like, hey, so, you know, what about this guy? And he's like, oh, I don't think he's going to take any more students. You know, you better not be applying just for that person. So anytime you run into someone who might know anything about the program that you're interested in, I don't know, talking to your professors is the best thing you can do, to as many of them as often as they will let you, because they have so much knowledge to share with you about, like, about what's going on in the field and about, you know, just
to add to that, also, they know the people, they know everyone else in their field at these other schools, so they'll be able to tell you who, you know, is at these other places, but they'll also be able to give you a recommendation that carries some weight with these other people. And maybe, like, and I also had people both at the company I worked for and, you know, here when I was applying to other schools, like, make phone calls to people at places I applied and be like, yeah, this guy's good, he's worked here for a couple of years, and, you know, knows what he's doing, that kind of thing.
If there is a
So,
personal connection.
the personal recommendation is a big deal.
So how about we switch gears to being a PhD student, and then if you guys have questions at the end, we can ask about the application process again. So, seniors first. How is it doing? I mean, you had a very special PhD program, right? Yeah, you can explain how that went.
I don't know. So I guess I did the typical first year thing that everyone does. So basically, your first year you end up taking classes and then and not doing a whole lot of research, and then you have to take your qualifying. So every school has roughly the same kind of sequence of events for grad school. It varies from place to place, but the general idea is basically the first years tend to take a lot of classes and not do a lot of research, and then you have to take your qualifying exam or quals or Q exam or whatever, which here that basically amounts to standing in front of a chalkboard with 3 professors in front of you who can ask you anything they want, and you get grilled, and you have to, you know, not choke, basically. That seems to be the key. Everyone's more or less prepared for it, and then some people just get really scared and sort of don't go with the pressure. So anyway, there's that. That's kind of the first year. That's basically your whole first year is consumed with that, taking classes and then freaking out about the qualifying exam at the end of the first year. The second year, you start to do more researchy stuff, and so I ended up. So my advisor he got tenured and then had sabbatical for a year. So everyone's just going sabbatical every 7 years, where they get to take a year off and go do whatever they want somewhere else.
Like write a book or, you know, explore.
Yeah.
You know.
So he was
Is it
gone.
always every 7 years exactly?
Yeah, that's usually how it goes.
I think it's
I don't know.
they have some say in it, right? You know, they can decide if it's going to be the 7th or the 8th or whatever.
I think it varies a little bit, but that's generally the idea. So they get to go somewhere else for a year and kind of do something different. So my advisor took a sabbatical, and then he came back for about 3 months, and then he got a job at NASA. He basically was the CTO of NASA for a couple of years. So then he came back for a couple months and left again. So he was gone for like 3 years, right in the middle of my grad school experience, which was, it was okay for me because I had already worked for him for like 3 or 4 years as an undergrad and MEng, and I already was like pretty well established and knew what I was doing. So it wasn't a problem for me. It was definitely a problem for other people, like people who'd come on and were first years when he left. You know, it did not go as well for them. So that was, it made things a lot more difficult. From a funding standpoint, because of his position at NASA, there were conflict of interest issues, and he couldn't apply for grants and stuff. So our lab was sort of short on funding for a couple of years there. So I ended up through some random connections going out to NASA Ames, which is in the Bay Area in California, for over a year, like almost 2 years basically. So the whole time my advisor was gone at NASA, I was on the outside of the country, and they paid me, and I basically mostly got to work on my own research there, and then sort of occasionally helped out on other projects there, and they paid my stipend. So that worked out super well. And so that's another thing, you know, be open-minded. I would say I could not have predicted any of the stuff that happened to me in grad school, you know, at the beginning of it. And I think and I've had a really awesome experience. There's been a lot of up and downs and craziness, but I definitely don't regret it at all. I think it was an awesome experience. So I think definitely be open to, you know, trying different things, and also don't be afraid to I think go for things, to go after things that might seem a little nuts or unusual. So one of the things I did, which was brought up by lack of funding, was Kickstarter to raise money for one of my research projects, and that went really well. And that's actually how I got to NASA connected. Someone saw my Kickstarter thing online and they called me up like, hey, you want to come out to NASA Ames for a summer? Because we do small satellite stuff. And so I was like, yeah, sure. And then I ended up staying for 2 years. So it was like a lot of random chance and a lot of just because, because of going after things that may have been a little crazy. So I would, really, that's my advice. Go after the things you think are cool and take advantage of, basically don't say no to opportunities. Like I had this opportunity to, go to California, and it was just like, I could have easily been like, oh no, what happened to my research back here, and I don't know, like there are a million reasons to not do that, monetarily and like everything else. But I would say if you have those kind of opportunities, just go for it. Like grad school is a time in your life where you don't have a lot of responsibilities and you don't have, financial burdens that you will a couple years later and stuff like that. And like that's us pretty close to me. Like I'm married and own a house now and have a dog and all that stuff. And so like there's like a lot of real life coming that I can see coming, a few months from now, and like all that kind of stuff. And do it while you can. Like do crazy stuff while you have the chance.
So I want everybody to comment on how grad school is different from being an undergrad. So like you mentioned you take classes in grad school too, but how does it feel different to take
I have
classes?
one. You do so much in your classes. Your classes are so much work, but it's all stuff that you really like doing. It's like if you took all your favorite classes and that's all you do all the time. So it's not as burdensome. Like homework is kind of fun all of a sudden, which is weird, but totally awesome. That's my big one.
And I feel like there is this interesting thing where it doesn't matter so much that you get like an A+ in every of your classes, because you're not like building towards a GPA necessarily. I mean, it does matter depending on what you want to do afterwards, but it's not as important to get the top GPA as it is in undergrad. It matters more that you do good research, and we'll get into that.
In Professor Pope's class, I didn't get a single question right the entire semester. Like actually nothing. I got nothing right the whole semester. And I get an A. So, because I work my butt off. I mean, it's just so hard, and he's the only person who knows. You're like kind of doing homework.
Which class is that?
That was in his turbulence class. And it's like, the only resource is his book. That's it, because no one else has done it. And so like, if you don't get that, then you're kind of, that's it. So that was weird to figure out.
So I honestly had no idea what the deal was with grades. So I was like, I got great grades, but I feel like even if I had worked a little less on my classes and done more research, I would still have gotten, maybe A-, not A, sure, but it wouldn't matter really.
Yeah.
I'm not sure when it matters as a PhD student to get like straight A's.
It really doesn't at all. You shouldn't actually, spend a lot of time on it. It's definitely, it's a few notches down. It's like not even number 2.
Or at least it's not about getting the grade. Taking the class is nothing. You don't care about getting the grade. The reason you take the class and the reason you work hard at it is because you need to know these things, which is a totally different perspective, Yeah. So if you understand it by the end and don't turn in a report, like at least you understand it, which is the part that matters. I mean, turn in your reports.
Magically, you get the grade if you actually understand it, because if you understand at the final you'll do okay, at the project you'll do okay.
Right, exactly. So it's just a very different perspective as far as classes go.
And there's definitely a lot less like busy work and a lot more like huge projects that like take like 2 weeks or whatever to do.
And the other thing is you rarely will take more than 3 classes per semester. Maybe your first semester you will take 3 classes. So like what, like 10 to 12 credits? Am I right?
You're right. And then after that you're like, why did I ever do that to myself? Now I'm taking 2 classes right now and I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I do this? 2 classes.
Now I've decided, for example, I'm going to be taking a maximum of 1 class per semester, because that's how much you can handle and also do research. If you start taking 2 classes per semester, they have all these deadlines and they just interrupt your entire day with lecture and with meetings and with whatnot. So you can't really work unless you focus on your research.
For me, it always takes a while to like get into the code and get into what I'm doing. So having any interruptions is like not useful. And then the other thing is, if you're TAing at all, that takes so much time.
It's a big deal.
That's the other thing you will have to do. I'm guessing no matter which grad school you go to, at some point you will have to TA for a semester or 2.
Still
But that's only
TA
here.
once.
That's only here, actually. Most places don't have a teaching requirement.
I see.
So if you can fund yourself the whole time you're in grad school, at most schools, you don't ever have to teach.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's how you miss out on something, but.
TAing sounds cool, but it's, in my opinion, it's only cool if you're the one giving the lecture.
Right.
If you're just,
disagree
you
with
disagree.
that.
Okay, please elaborate.
I taught a class
Yeah.
where I was the lecturer, and I've also TA'd before. I mean, depends on what you're into, but yeah, it can be both. But doing the lectures is a whole lot more work.
Mm.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I mean, so teaching in general, I think it's cool if you like the class and if the professor sort of pulls their weight and
Yeah.
doesn't dump a lot of
Yeah,
work on you.
yeah, that's very good.
Yeah, that's basically what I would say.
Yeah. So don't always expect that because you will TA, you will get teaching experience, right? I mean, if you're just like, running lab session and grading exams, you don't get exactly teaching, like you get to see how it is to run a class, yes. But you don't get like lecturing experience, right? So yeah, you might want to pursue that if you're interested in going into teaching afterwards. Which makes me think, how about we talk about like opportunities after grad school?
Jobs and stuff.
Yeah, like what can you do with that PhD? Yeah. What are your plans, Kat?
Well, I think I want to go back to the industry. To me, teaching is okay, but that's definitely not something that I want to do for my life, as far as I know. And in terms of like options, I haven't looked into them yet. I'm doing my second
You're a second year.
Yeah, so it probably is better for SEC or even Spyros.
So can I mention something?
Yeah.
If it's teaching that you don't want to do,
Yeah.
about being a professor, how about those academic positions that are like research scientist or like adjunct professor or like there are some weird semi-academic positions that are research only. Maybe you co-advise some student, but you don't teach at all.
I've been staying at school.